Hey, what's up, guys? So, as you all know, the U.S. bombed Iran. According to the propaganda, they bombed Iran's nuclear facilities where they were enriching uranium 235 to the point of critical mass, where they could weaponize it and threaten America or America's allies in the region. Now, I encourage you all out there to take this with some healthy skepticism and look deeper and read between the lines as to the real geopolitical reasons as to why this happened. So I'm going to give you guys a quick comparative history, if you will, on two situations that has similar ring or tone, if you will, and I'll let you guys do the conclusion on this. So I'll give you a disclaimer first. I am not a political scientist nor am I a historian. I'm just an enthusiast of these subjects. So I encourage you all out there to go do your own research and be critical of me as well, right? No matter how compelling the information I may give you, it is always good to fact check and source yourself. So I highly encourage you to do this. So let me break down the story. So, as you all know, September 11th, 2000, America was attacked. The Twin Towers were destroyed, they toppled, and it caused the death of 3,000 innocent Americans. This was a tragedy for America, for the world. This was a very visceral moment. It was very emotionally impactful. I remember myself. I think I was a senior in high school, and again, this was a utter shock to the world. Now, the rhetoric at the time was that there was a Central Asian country called Afghanistan, and they were ran by a terrorist government, and this terrorist government was harboring terrorists, particularly this one group called Al Qaeda, and particularly this one gentleman called Osama bin Laden, right? And the news was that the Taliban, the government in Afghanistan, refused to turn over Osama bin Laden. So let me give you the other side of that story, right? Prior to 9/11, America was in negotiations with the Taliban to establish a pipeline through Afghanistan. The idea was to establish a pipeline through Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, all the way to the Indian Ocean. This is the gas and oil pipeline. This was a way to presumably circumvent Iran, which is an OPEC nation that the U.S. has historically had a lot of friction with. So this was the idea. Not to mention that prior to that, there was an election that was stolen because the Florida votes didn't count. And our president at the time, George W. Bush, won the election. So, what better way and what better distraction to have than to have a war going on and get that very controversial topic off people's mind, if you will. So again, 9/11 happens. I'm not saying that the Bushes were involved in 9/11 by any means. Again, that was done by 11 Saudi nationals, Islamists, probably coming from the madrasas in Saudi Arabia and Wahhabism and so forth. But again, let's put that aside for a second. Let's go back to Central Asia to Afghanistan. So prior to 9/11, they're having these negotiations. Afghanistan wants this pipeline in for many reasons. They want legitimacy. They want to be recognized as a government, and more importantly for them, they want cash. They need cash. They're a landlocked Central Asian country, so again, this benefits them in a way. So when the Twin Towers fall and the intelligence reports come out that bin Laden was behind this, and they find out that bin Laden is staying in Afghanistan, right? The Afghans are harboring him, if you will. So the U.S. reaches out to the Taliban. And for those of you who've been to Afghanistan, there's many ethnic groups. There's one predominant one called the Pashtuns. And they're a very tribal society, and they have codes of honor. They have one particular code called Pashtuwali. And this is sort of the laws of hospitality in Afghanistan, where they provide food and water and shelter for their guests, right? So the Taliban, what they responded to the yes was not that they weren't going to turn him in. What the Taliban wanted was, okay, sure, we'll go ahead and turn him over to a third party, right? In this case, presumably, Pakistan, and you could extradite him from there if you want. However, you need to provide proof to us, right? This is our way to at least give this guy who we're hosting in our nation some due process before we go ahead and snatch him and either turn him over to you or give him to the Pakistanis. But again, as they said, we're going to turn him over to a third party. The U.S., presumably, being the U.S., told them to go fuck themselves, and they launched the invasion, right? Which was much to the Taliban's surprise. So they launched the invasion. we toppled the government in Afghanistan. 20 years later, we spent $2.3 trillion, thousands of lives lost, and again, just enriched military industrial complex, companies like Halliburton and Blackwater and so forth, right? So again, that was also based on false premises, considering that the hijackers, weren't even from Central Asia, they were from Saudi Arabia. And again, a whole slew of nuances that tie into that as well, right? I encourage you guys to go read about, for example, bin Laden and his family, right? Bin Laden's father, Mohammed bin Laden, he established an enormous I think it's $1 billion construction company in Saudi Arabia called, I think it's SBG, so Saudi Bin Laden Group. So you see all those beautiful mosques in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen and Oman and UAE and Dubai, buildings and so forth. SBG is involved in that, as well as members of the Bin Laden family involved in a group called the Carlyle Group, which is an investment firm for defense articles, military industrial complex, and aerospace technologies and so forth. So again, I encourage you to look into that because that was also, that war was fought under false pretenses, and again, the Taliban was used as a scapegoat, if you will, right? Considering that nation building is not the U.S.'s thing. Now, on the flip side of that, you have Iraq. So Iraq is also an OPEC nation. And before the attacks, before 9/11, in the year 2000, Iraq decided to sell their oil in euros instead of dollars, which challenges U.S. global power dynamics, if you will, right? Remember, U.S. dollar is the global reserve. Most of the reserves are in dollars. Everything's traded in dollars, and every time you buy a barrel of oil, you do it in petrodollars, and the U.S. gets a cut. So since the 90s, the U.S. had very strong sanctions against Iraq. They blocked food, they blocked medicine and aid. A lot of Iraqis died even before the war started. So this was Saddam Hussein's final act of defiance. Not to mention that Saddam Hussein was part of the Ba'ath Party, which is an Arab nationalist movement. This was a very secular government. This was not an Islamist government like the Taliban was, right? So again, that war was also fought on false premises, saying that bin Laden was harboring WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, which ironically, the few WMDs that Iraq did have were provided by the U.S. to fight the Iranians back in the 80s, right? And most of those weapons were destroyed by Saddam Hussein, which was verified by UN weapon inspectors at the end. So again, both these wars were fought on false premises. Many Americans were maimed. Many Afghans and Iraqi civilians were killed and maimed, and lives were lost. A lot of destruction. Again, a lot of pain in the world. So again, I encourage all you guys out there to look into this. Be critical when you hear, these slogans about national security and defending freedom and so forth. So that's my breakdown on that. Let me know what you guys think. If you agree, disagree, have a different perspective, or perhaps a different historical angle, you can share with me in the comments below. Thank you.